I was sipping burnt coffee from the staff kitchen when I got the call to come upstairs. No emotion in the voice. Just a clipped request from Leah in HR to report to conference room 7B. My stomach knew before my head caught up. After 22 years with Valiant Core Systems, I knew the tone of a corporate ambush. The kind where the air is cold even when the thermostat is fine. My name is Richard Mallory, and until 11:42 a.m. that Monday, I was Director of Infrastructure, the longest-standing executive not related to a founding member. I was there when our servers were in closets, when payroll was a spreadsheet, and when the CEO still cared about culture. I helped build Valiant into a powerhouse, from a 12-person consultancy into a 4,000-employee juggernaut spanning 3 continents. And I was about to be discarded like a corrupted file. I walked in, saw the trio already seated: Martin Klein, our freshly minted COO from some West Coast unicorn, Andrea from HR, who looked like she wanted to vanish into the upholstery, and a third man, some lawyer I didn't recognize, dressed like a ventriloquist dummy in a navy suit too tight for his ambition. Martin stood. "Richard, let's keep this efficient. We're eliminating your role effective immediately. Restructuring initiative. Efficient. That's the word he used. Not necessary. Not respectful. Just efficient. You have until 3 p.m. to vacate the premises. You'll receive a severance offer by end of day. No explanation. No gratitude. Just the sweep of a blade disguised as optimization." "Understood," I said. 2 decades of service reduced to a sentence. Andrea slid a folder toward me. Legal jargon. NDAs. A waiver of claims. And the promise of 12 weeks' pay if I agreed to vanish quietly. I didn't touch it. I stood. "You'll need to sign out at the security desk," Martin added. "Standard protocol." My eyes met his. He flinched, just a flicker, like a man who knows the enemy still has a full magazine. I left without another word. I didn't need to ask why. I already knew. Over the past 6 months, Martin and his crew had started poking into systems they didn't understand. Calling legacy code outdated. Proposing full transitions to cloud infrastructure with no regard for the custom architecture I'd spent years building. It wasn't just modernization. It was erasure. They wanted control without comprehension. Power without process. And I was the last obstacle. On the surface, I played the part. The aging infrastructure lead with a calm demeanor and a drawer full of cables. But beneath that, I was the last person with full access to everything. Server credentials, audit logs, payment system overrides, legacy admin tools that weren't even documented in the new SOPs. They thought they were removing a vestige of the past. What they didn't know is that I was the fail-safe. And I had seen something I wasn't supposed to 2 weeks before they called me in. It started with a misfired invoice. A $94,000 payment to a vendor I didn't recognize, Eastbridge Analytics. I flagged it for the finance team. No reply. The following week, another payment. $128,000. Same vendor. Same routing path. Buried under consulting services in the general ledger. But when I traced the endpoint, the EIN used for Eastbridge matched another vendor from years ago, one we blacklisted after a compliance breach. Same shell, new paint. I raised it to my supervisor. Silence. Then, 3 days later, access restrictions started creeping in. One system at a time. Like they were testing the fences. I knew what that meant. They were prepping the purge. So I did what I always did when the storm started coming. I backed everything up. I'm not talking about files on a thumb drive. I'm talking image captures of transaction logs, full audit trails, server access histories. I activated my mirror server in Quincy, a legacy redundancy platform I'd set up after a ransomware scare 5 years ago. I cloned everything. No one remembered it existed. Because I never told anyone. That was the day I stopped being an employee. That was the day I started becoming a ghost. By 2:47 p.m., I walked out of the building I'd helped raise from drywall and whiteboards to glass and global ambition. I left the cactus from my desk behind. Let someone else try to keep it alive. I drove home in silence. Andrea, my wife, met me at the door. I didn't need to speak. One look at my face and she understood. "Sit," she said, putting coffee on. "Start at the beginning." I told her everything. The cuts. The ghost company. The growing pile of red flags. She didn't flinch. "So what now?" I opened the basement door. Now I start digging. Over the next 5 days, I became an archaeologist of fraud. Every log entry, every redirect, every shadow payment that funneled through Eastbridge, I captured it all. Over $3.2 million across 14 months. routed through 5 subsidiaries, all traceable to a single Delaware holding group registered to a name I hadn't heard in years, Marcus Ballard, former VP of Corporate Strategy, fired 3 years ago for vision misalignment. He was working with them, or through them. Either way, he wasn't doing it alone. Martin was too new to know the old ghosts, but someone on the board had to be helping. That was the only way to approve multi-million-dollar payments without setting off alarms. I created a single encrypted file with everything, the digital Rosetta Stone of their corruption. Then I made 3 copies. One went in a safe deposit box in Joliet. One to an encrypted cloud drop accessible only through a tokenized code. And the third, the nuclear option, I burned onto a disk and placed it in a black envelope labeled, to be opened in the event of Richard Mallory's sudden disappearance. Andrea raised an eyebrow. Dramatic. Necessary, I said. These people aren't just thieves. They're architects of silence. She nodded. So what's the next move? I make them think they've won, I said. And then I show them what a real architect can build. The funny thing about being erased is how much freedom it gives you. No meetings. No reports. No eyes on your screen. While Martin and his circle were clinking glasses over my termination, I was rewriting the entire playbook. I spent the first week cataloging everything. Transaction patterns, ghost vendors, VPN access logs, personal correspondences I'd quietly archived over the years. But what I really needed was confirmation, something or someone to bridge Marcus Ballard back into the building. That's when I remembered a name I hadn't thought of in years. Kyle Brenner. Junior procurement specialist, smart kid, sharp as hell, barely 30, and hungry for something more than cubicle fame. I'd mentored him once, back when mentoring meant more than just scheduling a Zoom call and pretending to care. I shot him a message through Proton Mail, anonymized and encrypted. Remember the server migration from 2018? You left a backdoor in our vendor portal. I need access. You'll want to see what I found. He replied an hour later. If this is Richard, I'm in. Bless the curious ones. Over the next 2 days, Kyle fed me internal communications from the vendor integration system. Turns out Eastbridge Analytics wasn't just siphoning money. It had been assigned administrator-level access to our ERP system for months. And that access had been used to approve contracts, sign off on expense reports, and redirect vendor payments. All under the guise of AI optimization tools. One file made my blood run cold. A set of onboarding documents for Eastbridge, digitally signed by Marcus Ballard, using Martin's credentials. There it was. The smoking gun. They'd cloned credentials. Fake logins. Even spoofed IP addresses to make it look like approvals came from multiple executives. But the timestamps didn't lie. Several key approvals happened when Martin was in Dubai on a press tour. Someone had messed up the time zones. I smiled. Sloppy arrogance. The thing about high-level fraud is that the people doing it never assume someone will actually check the receipts. They rely on noise, volume, and plausible deniability. But I wasn't someone. I was the last line of defense they didn't account for. Still, evidence wasn't enough. I needed leverage. And for that, I needed a face-to-face. So I made my first real move. I showed up at the quarterly networking mixer for the Midwest Tech Council. No invite, no badge, just a navy blazer and the confidence of a man who knew the security team wouldn't question a face they'd seen for 2 decades. I stood at the back, drink in hand, and watched Martin work the room like a Silicon Valley evangelist. Talking synergies, agile expansion, scaling strategies. All buzzwords. No substance. I waited until he was alone by the bar, nursing a whiskey. Then I stepped beside him and said, "Your time zones are off." He turned, expression slow to recognize me. When he did, the blood drained from his face. "Richard, let's not pretend," I said. "You had me removed. Fine. But you left fingerprints all over the sandbox." He tried to compose himself. "You're not supposed to be here." "Neither are embezzlers," I said. He leaned closer. "You're making serious accusations." "No," I said. "I'm compiling serious evidence. But I wanted you to know first. Because when this drops, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that you had a chance to come clean." He laughed, too loud. A few people glanced over. "You sound like a conspiracy theorist." "Maybe," I said. "But conspiracy becomes truth when you forget to clean your metadata." I finished my drink and walked away. I didn't need him to admit anything. I just needed him to panic. And panic he did. The next morning, Kyle messaged me. "They're scrubbing logs. Purging access history. Pulling audit tools from your old monitoring system." Predictable. They were trying to bury the body. But they were digging in the wrong graveyard. My mirror server in Quincy still had everything. Immutable, time-stamped, off-network. While they erased, I built. I contacted Eleanor Sharp, a forensic accountant with a reputation for destroying corporate smoke screens. She used to work for the SEC. Now she ran her own consultancy, quiet, expensive, and surgical. I gave her everything. Her response was exactly what I needed to hear. This is the kind of fraud that puts people in prison. Music to my ears. We drew up a phased strategy. First, documentation. Every transaction, every shell company, every line of code that funneled funds through Eastbridge. Second, exposure. But not the usual whistleblower route. No, we were going bigger. Eleanor had contacts with a financial crimes journalist at the Ledger, a publication known for taking down billion-dollar companies. We would give them the exclusive, but only after we set the fuse. The timing had to be perfect. Valiant's annual investor call was in 2 weeks. It would be live, recorded, public, and it would be Martin's first time leading it solo as COO. We'd release the story that morning, right before the markets opened. Let the questions come pouring in mid-call. Let the board watch the house they built start to tremble in real time. Meanwhile, I started tying up loose ends. I drove to Joliet and rotated the contents of the safe deposit box. I updated the cloud drop keys. I gave Andrea a sealed envelope labeled, "Activate if I'm arrested or disappear." She didn't ask questions. She just nodded. That's what nearly 30 years of marriage builds. Trust under pressure. With 10 days to go, I made my next move. I reached out to Lisa Monroe, the executive assistant to one of the board members I used to brief on cybersecurity years ago. She was sharp, discreet, and had once told me over coffee that if I ever needed an ally, she'd be there. I sent her a secure link with a summary. Just the tip of the iceberg. She responded 20 minutes later. "I'll make sure he sees it. He always liked you more than Martin." That night, Andrea made steak and poured bourbon. "Are we in too deep?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "But I'd rather go down swinging than let them bury the truth." She raised her glass. "Then let's make it hurt." A week out from the call, things got chaotic. Cal messaged, "IT just did a full sweep. Wiped all logs. Changed every admin password. Total lockdown." Perfect. That meant they were scared. Scared people make mistakes. I watched as they tried to shift vendor addresses, dissolve holding companies, and rewrite internal access policies. Too late. My copies had everything. The more they scrubbed, the guiltier they looked. 5 days to go. I contacted the Ledger through Eleanor's secure channel. The journalist's name was Morgan Valente, Pulitzer finalist, known for exposing fraud at a pharma giant last year. She reviewed our data and called me directly. "I've never seen a cleaner trail," she said. "This is corporate suicide, and you're the guy holding the match. You'll run it." I asked. Morning of the call. Front page. We'll title it, "Valiant's Vanity, the Hidden Cost of Corporate Reinvention." "One more thing," I said. "I want a quote in there. Attributed to me." "You sure?" "Positive." It's time the quiet guy got to speak. I dictated it. They thought I was part of the furniture. But I was the foundation. And now the cracks are showing. She laughed. "Poetic. You sure you weren't in PR?" "No," I said. "Just invisible long enough to see everything." 2 days left. I got a call from a blocked number. I answered. "Mr. Mallory," the voice said. It was Martin. "You've made yourself a problem." "I was a solution," I said. "Until you made me a problem. You need to stop whatever you're doing." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "Just watching. Like always." "You think you're the hero here," he hissed. "No," I said. "I think I'm the consequence." I hung up. Then I called Eleanor. "They're sweating." "Good," she said. "Let them drown." The night before the call, I slept like a stone. No guilt. No fear. Just the stillness of a man who knew the system he built was finally serving its purpose. At 7:42 a.m. the next morning, the Ledger article went live. Front page. Banner headline. Names, numbers, quotes. My quote. By 8:05, my phone was blowing up. Andrea read the story over breakfast, eyes wide. "It's a bloodbath," she whispered. "The comments are brutal." I nodded. Wait until the investor call. At 9 a.m., Martin stepped onto the stage in front of a screen showing Q3 performance highlights. Confident. Crisp. Rehearsed. At 9:06, the first investor asked about Eastbridge Analytics. At 9:08, someone else demanded to know if the COO had any prior relationship with Marcus Ballard. At 9:10, The feed cut. Silence. Andrea looked at me. That was fast. They pulled the plug, I said. They'll spin it as a technical glitch. At 9:17, I got a message from Lisa Monroe. He's out. Emergency board session in progress. At 9:24, Kyle messaged, security just escorted Martin and 2 finance guys out of the building. I closed my laptop. Exhaled. Years of service. Months of digging. One perfect strike. But this was only the beginning. Now the real reckoning would begin. The silence after a detonation is always the loudest part. By noon that day, Valiant Core Systems was trending for all the wrong reasons. Not on some tech blog or niche financial column. No, this was CNN ticker-worthy, Fortune featured, Reddit front page kind of scandal. Stock halted. Emergency meetings triggered. Whispers turning into headlines. COO implicated in fraud. Secret vendor funneling millions. And the kicker? The whistleblower was the man they fired just weeks before. My name. My quote. My face finally brought into focus. For 2 decades, I was the guy who kept the lights on, the systems running, the fires put out before they ever made it past a smoke detector. And now, ironically, the whole building was on fire, and I was the one who struck the match. Andrea watched it unfold with a strange mix of pride and disbelief. They're calling you the architect of accountability, she said, scrolling through comment threads. You've gone viral. I smirked. All it took was betrayal, surveillance, encrypted backups, a hidden server, a forged signature network, and a little push from an investigative journalist. Don't let it go to your head, she said. You still leave the coffee spoon in the sink like a war criminal. I laughed. First real laugh in weeks. It felt good. Real. But I knew the storm wasn't over. Not even close. That afternoon, I got a call from Robert Lansing, Valiant chairman of the board. Former Navy officer. Smart, restrained, pragmatic. Mr. Mallory, he said, not quite warm but not cold either. We'd like to speak with you. Privately. Tomorrow morning. Who's we? I asked. The remaining board members, he said. We'd like to discuss what happens next. I already told everything to the ledger, I said. You have the report. Yes, he said. And that's exactly why we want to talk to you. I agreed, with conditions, neutral location, no lawyers, and full transparency. He accepted. We met at a private club downtown, the kind where chairs creak with old money and the coffee is poured by men in white gloves. The room had no windows. Just a long table, dark leather, soft lights. 5 board members. All men in suits who wore their regret in tight necklines and overpolished shoes. Lansing stood. Mr. Mallory, let me begin by saying the board owes you more than an apology. We owe you the future of this company. I didn't say anything. Just looked at them. Let the silence do the heavy lifting. Martin Klein has been terminated effective immediately, he continued. Criminal investigations are underway. Internal audits confirm your findings. The numbers may exceed 5 million. I nodded once. That tracks. We have a proposal, he said. We'd like you to return. Not to your old role, but as Chief Integrity Officer. Executive authority. Clean up. Restore trust. Protect the system you built. I blinked. Slowly. You want me to fix the mess you enabled? We want you to lead the rebuild, he said. With autonomy. With full access. Answering only to the board. I let it hang there. Then leaned in. I was loyal to this company for 22 years. I bled for it. Missed birthdays. Buried family members with PTO time. And when I became inconvenient, you let them cut me like scrap metal. We made a mistake, Lansing said. We let a cancer grow. You didn't just let it grow, I said. You funded it. You gave it a corner office and stock options. And now we're asking you to help us amputate it, he replied. Before it spreads. I stood. Reached into my coat. Dropped a folder on the table. Those are my conditions, I said. Read them carefully. I won't negotiate. They opened it. Inside, full executive access. Dedicated compliance budget. Whistleblower protections expanded across all departments. Immediate audits of all procurement, vendor, and expense systems. And one final line. Richard Mallory will have final authority on any restructuring or terminations within the technology and finance divisions. You want the power to fire the people who tried to erase you, one of them muttered. No, I said. I want the power to protect the people who saw what was happening and were too scared to speak. And I want to make sure no one else has to go through what I did. They asked for 24 hours. I gave them 12. That night, they called back. We accept. All of it. At 8 a.m. the next morning, I walked back into Valiant's headquarters, not through the employee entrance, but through the executive lobby. Different elevator, different clearance badge, different weight in my chest. Cal met me at the 14th floor, eyes wide. You really did it, he said. You brought the whole tower down. Now we build something better, I said. My first act was immediate. I shut down East Bridge's access permanently and turned over all data to federal investigators. Second, I brought in Eleanor Sharp as a consultant to help me design the internal audit framework. Third, I sent a company-wide memo clear, direct, zero buzzwords. We lost our way. People in power forgot who builds systems, who protects data, who puts in the invisible hours that make everything run. That ends today. I'm not here to rule. I'm here to guard. If you see something wrong, speak. You're protected. If you're part of the problem, run. I'm already watching. Some people clapped. Others packed boxes. That week alone, I fired 3 directors, suspended 2 VPs, and launched a retroactive vendor review spanning 5 years. Every skeleton dragged into daylight. By Friday, we had recovered $2.1 million in clawbacks and asset freezes. But the most unexpected moment came that afternoon, when Lisa Monroe from the board came to my office with a small envelope. We thought you should see this, she said, handing it over. Inside was a handwritten letter from Marcus Ballard, sent from a holding cell. It read, I never hated you, Richard. I just envied you. You had the keys. I just wanted to walk through the doors. I set the letter down. Sad man, I said. He always thought the room mattered more than the lock. Lisa smiled faintly. He thought power was access. You understood that power is integrity. Weeks passed. Headlines moved on. But inside the company, the fire had become fuel. We rewrote the vendor policy, installed real-time auditing systems, created an anonymous reporting portal. And every Friday, I met with junior staffers one-on-one, not as a formality, but as a habit. Because the people who notice the first cracks aren't the ones in suits. They're the ones at the bottom of the tower, hearing the groans in the foundation. And then came the press. NPR wanted an interview. Bloomberg sent a request. Time wanted to include me in a feature on modern corporate reformers. I declined them all. Except one. The Ledger. I owed Morgan Valente the exclusive. We met for coffee off the record. She brought a recorder. I brought perspective. So, she asked, what would you call this chapter of your life? I thought about it. Not revenge, I said. Redemption? Maybe. But honestly, it feels more like restoration. Of purpose. Of truth. Of the quiet guy finally being heard. What's next? She asked. You going to stay? For now, I said. But one day I'll walk away for real. And when I do, I want to know the system won't collapse just because no one's left watching. She nodded. Then asked, one last thing. Any regrets? I thought about the years. The sacrifice. The betrayal. The lonely nights in server rooms and the meetings where I was invisible. Then I remembered that final investor call. Martin's face when the questions came. The sound of silence after the truth hits the room. No, I said. No regrets. Just lessons. I shook her hand, walked out into the street, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to be seen. Success, like fire, draws shadows you didn't know existed. For a time, I believed we'd turned the page. That the storm had passed and what remained was solid ground. Valiant was stabilizing. The internal culture shifted. People spoke up now. Errors were flagged without fear, and middle managers no longer used silence as a shield. I had my title, my autonomy, my redemption. But what I didn't realize was that fire always burns deeper than expected. And sometimes, the rot isn't just in the foundation, it's in the roots. 2 months after I was appointed Chief Integrity Officer, I received a call from someone I never thought I'd hear from again. You're playing with heavier pieces than you realize, said the voice. I froze. Who is this? I'm someone who knows the name Callner Industries still means something to the people you just embarrassed. The line went dead. Callner. The name chilled me. Callner had been a silent equity partner in Valiant's early years. They backed our series of funding in 2006, then disappeared quietly after the 2011 restructuring. But they never really left. They owned 11% of the company, just below the threshold for mandatory board representation, but enough to pull strings when needed. I'd seen the filings, tucked into shareholder reports no one bothered to read. And now, someone from their orbit was reaching out. Threatening? Warning? I wasn't sure. That night, I dug deep, old filings, corporate registrations, obscure audit trails. That's when I saw it. Connor had ties to one of the shell vendors we shut down during the Eastbridge purge. Not directly, but one layer beneath. A silent holding company called Daxton Developments was co-owned by a Connor-aligned investment vehicle. That vendor had received $740,000 over 5 years for logistics consulting. The money trail was clean on the surface, but I knew laundering when I saw it. This wasn't just financial corruption anymore. This was systemic. Old money, invisible influence, legacy deals no one dared question. I called Eleanor. We missed something, I told her. She reviewed the files and confirmed my fear. This was deeper than Ballard, than Martin. They were just tools. Someone else held the blueprints. I requested a confidential board meeting. Lansing approved. When I presented the findings, 2 board members exchanged glances. Subtle, controlled, but I caught it. One of them, Gerard Hamley, had served on the board for over a decade. I knew then he was the bridge, the liaison, the internal echo for Connor's interests. After the meeting, Lansing pulled me aside. You're suggesting we dig into one of our original backers, he said. I'm not suggesting, I said. I'm stating. Either we finish cleaning house, or we let the mold come back through the walls. He didn't argue. He just nodded. Proceed carefully. That's when the sabotage began. My access was clipped, minor systems at first. Logs went missing. Email archives suddenly had gaps. Someone inside was working against me. So I moved fast. I called in an old favor, Thomas Reed, ex-NSA turned cybersecurity consultant. He owed me from a mess we cleaned up together in 2014. I brought him in quietly, under a dummy project code. Within 72 hours, he found the breach. Not from outside. From my own assistant, Claire, the woman who'd brought me coffee every morning, who smiled politely in meetings, who'd once cried when I was fired. She was forwarding weekly summaries of my activity to an encrypted inbox linked to Daxton Developments. Surveillance, digital tailing, internal espionage. I confronted her alone. She folded fast. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd ruin me, she whispered. They knew about my brother's DUI, about the mortgage application, about everything. They knew my weak spots. They always do, I said. What did they want to know? Who you were talking to? What files you were touching? If you were preparing anything for regulators. I dismissed her quietly. Didn't fire her. That would alert them. Instead, I let her think I was going blind. But I used her channel to feed them false intel. Misdirection. I planted breadcrumbs, reports on defunct systems, irrelevant audit trails, fake projects with flashy names. Thomas ran parallel sweeps. Within a week, we found 2 more nodes, executives still loyal to the old guard, passing information through burner accounts. It was a network, an infection, one designed to wait out people like me. I couldn't go to the board yet, not with Hanley still in the room. So I went external. Through Morgan Valente at the ledger, I fed key pieces of data, nothing traceable, just enough to raise questions in the financial press. The headlines started slowly. Are Valiant's ghosts still in the machine? New allegations tie old money to vendor fraud. I watched Hanley squirm during the next board meeting. Lisa caught my eye. She knew. We were circling, tightening the noose. But Connor didn't back down. Instead, they came forward. Publicly, they issued a statement to investors reaffirming their long-standing commitment to Valiant's success and offering to support leadership through turbulent times. Classic move. Shield yourself with language of unity while reinforcing invisible control. I countered immediately. I authorized a special audit on all legacy vendor relationships tied to Connor Holdings. I knew it would trigger alarms. It did. The next morning, a subpoena landed on my desk. Not from Valiant. From Connor's attorneys. They accused me of defamation, of malicious targeting, of violating executive conduct codes. The goal wasn't to win. It was to intimidate. Tie me up in litigation. Slow me down. I responded with a single-page statement. I stand by my audits. I stand by the evidence. And if they want to fight in court, I suggest they bring more than rhetoric. Lansing backed me. Publicly. That move surprised me. He wasn't known for courage. But maybe he'd seen enough. Maybe he'd grown tired of pretending control didn't come with consequences. Behind the scenes, we were building something else. Eleanor, Thomas, Kyle, Lisa, and I, we formed a private task force. Every week, off-site, no digital trail. We called it the Purge Committee. In 4 weeks, We uncovered $2.7 million more in vendor bleed linked to Kallner-affiliated shells. We compiled it, printed it, filed it, sealed it, and then I made my final move. I leaked one line of the final audit to Morgan. Just one. Compromised executives aided by long-term equity holders embedded through legacy capital vehicles. It spread like wildfire. Suddenly Kallner wasn't just a shady investor. They were the smoking gun. Their phones rang off the hook. Investors called for transparency. Hanley resigned within 48 hours. The day after that, Kallner's general counsel sent a quiet offer to settle, drop the subpoenas, dissolve the shell vendors, and withdraw entirely from Valiant within 60 days. I brought it to Lansing. This ends it, I said. But it doesn't fix what they did. He nodded. Then don't let them just walk. So I added one more clause. Kallner would donate $10 million to an internal whistleblower trust fund. Blind managed. Accessible to any employee in future who came forward with integrity. They agreed. Quietly. But not before trying one last time to reach me. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a letter. Handwritten. No signature. Just one line. You were supposed to build the wall, not tear it down. I burned the letter. Watched the ink curl. Then walked outside into the autumn wind, clean, clear, and free. Valiant was no longer haunted. It was whole. And I was no longer rebuilding on ashes. I was building something new. Something real. You don't build something for 22 years and just walk away. Not really. Even after the house is cleaned, the rot removed, the walls repainted, something lingers. Something settles in the corners where the light doesn't quite reach. I thought I had restored Valiant Core Systems. Thought I had buried the past and sealed the doors. But some ghosts wait for the quiet to come back. They wait until you're sure it's over. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when I got the alert. Not from the security system. From a deadman switch I built 15 years ago, code I wrote during an all-nighter while patching a network exploit that could have sunk our product line back in 2009. I never told anyone about it. Not even Andrea. It was an automated anomaly detector, designed to scan metadata changes in critical systems and trigger if something outside protocol occurred, like someone attempting to wipe legacy audit trails from cold storage. And that's exactly what someone had just tried to do. The system didn't activate unless someone reached deep, far deeper than public access layers. I traced the IP. Internal. Executive floor. Someone with elevated access. Someone with new clearance granted only in the last 2 weeks. I narrowed it. A senior HR official. Name, Mitchell Wiles. I'd seen the name. New hire from a law firm, brought in to modernize compliance. What no one knew, yet, was that Mitchell used to work for a private equity group that once tried to buy Valiant during our down years. A failed acquisition. Quietly dissolved. Except it wasn't dissolved. It had merged into a financial firm owned by, you guessed it, Kallner's shadow network. The timing made sense. Kallner had pulled out. But they left an infection behind. A second plan. Insurance. And Mitchell was the fuse. I activated Legacy Protocol. My final safeguard. A system I designed in case Valiant ever fell into the wrong hands. Not a shutdown. Not a virus. A map. A cascade of forensic breadcrumbs that activated across every archived subsystem, creating a real-time snapshot of who accessed what, when, and why. The software began silently tagging files, logging activity, creating a heat map of potential corruption with timestamps so specific they could track movement room by room. By the end of the day, I had everything. Mitchell had accessed the cold storage vault. Then he initiated a command to purge records from 2010 to 2015, the years when Kallner was most involved in vendor procurement. Records that, if deleted, would eliminate any trace of early financial manipulation. Records that weren't just inconvenient, they were dangerous. Not just to the company. To me. Because they included evidence I'd never released. Things I'd seen. Things I'd buried. Years ago, before I knew what Kallner really was. There was one file I hadn't touched since 2012. It was labeled simply, Sparrow. Inside was a document signed by a former Valiant CFO. One who died in a car crash in 2013. The document detailed a covert payout. $1.5 million, to a political action committee linked to a senator who later pushed legislation that favored Kallner-aligned tech firms. The payout had been buried through 5 intermediaries. The memo clearly stated, ensure Mallory does not see this. He's loyal but may not understand the nuance. But I had seen it, and I did understand. And I kept it. Not to blackmail, not to destroy, But because even then, I knew systems rot from the inside. That file would have vanished forever if Mitchell succeeded. But he didn't. Because I wrote the code. Because I planned for the worst. Because ghosts don't rest until the silence is earned. I called Lansing. "We have a problem," I said. I explained everything. He was silent for a long time. "You want him gone?" he finally asked. "No," I said. "I want him to explain himself. To the board. And I want them to hear everything. All of it. Including the file?" he asked. "Especially the file," I said. The emergency meeting happened 2 days later. Closed session. Just board members, Lisa, myself, and Mitchell, who walked in looking calm, collected, clueless. Until I started talking. I showed the logs. The breach. The intent to purge. Then I showed the Sparrow file. The room changed. Air got heavier. I stopped blinking. "You were trying to bury something that predates your time here," I told Mitchell. "Which means someone sent you. And you accepted." "I don't know what that is," he said, voice tight. "I was conducting a standard compliance sweep." "No," I said. "You were removing a trail. One that connects Kallner not just to vendor fraud, but to political manipulation. Interstate commerce favoritism. Possibly worse." "You can't prove that," he snapped. I handed him a printed report. "I already have." Lansing dismissed him. He didn't walk out. He was escorted. We never heard from him again. That night, Lansing called me. "What do we do with the Sparrow file?" he asked. "We sit on it," I said. "For now, let the SEC finish with Kallner. Then we hand it to them. Quietly. Cleanly." "And you?" he asked. "What will you do?" "I'll finish the build," I said. "Then I'll walk away." I spent the next 3 months putting the final layers in place. I restructured IT. Built a rotating integrity committee composed of junior staff across all departments. Wrote a whistleblower AI detection algorithm that analyzed behavior patterns, not just keywords. It learned where silence lived and dug there. When it was done, I wrote my final memo to the company. In systems, as in life, security isn't about walls. It's about watching. About knowing when silence is signal. About remembering that sometimes the quiet ones are keeping the flood at bay. If you're reading this, know that the dam holds. But only if you guard it too. I retired 3 weeks later. No press. No party. Just Andrea waiting outside with the car, engine running, her eyes knowing. We drove away in silence. 10 miles out, she reached across the console. "You sure you're done?" she asked. I nodded. I was never the king. Just the sentry. And now the gate is sealed. That night, we opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving for 20 years. Outside, the sky rumbled, spring coming in. "Do you think they'll be okay without you?" she asked. I thought about it. The protocols. The people. The system. "Yeah," I said. "Because I built it like I knew they wouldn't be." "And the file?" she asked. "Still buried. Still safe." She leaned back. "You know, I'm proud of you." I looked at her. "I know." She smiled. "But you're still not getting out of painting the kitchen." I laughed. And for the first time in years, it wasn't a weapon. It was just joy. The house was quiet. The ghosts were gone. And Richard Mallory, once erased, once invisible, was finally fully free.